Somebody gave me this.
There has needed. And then that's the beginning of their living.
All right, and it's August 19th, 5:45 p.m. We're going to call this Finance Committee meeting to order. Present are council members Lang, Toss, Chu, Hauser, and Marmee. First item, the unappropriated balance stands at $577,730. The balance of the budget stabilization fund is at $757,681. First item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $6,822.40. For the water lines, who's speaking on that? I don't know what that is, I'm sorry. Money's paid incorrect vendor, sent back to pay the correct vendor.
Sorry about that.
No, you're all right.
This was for some funds that, were paid to Ohio Water Development Authority. And they had to credit that back to us, and we need to in turn encumber that and pay, the actual contractor. So it was just a mistake in the auditing process.
All right.
We processed the invoice.
Motion by Lang,
Second.
second by Hauser. It's because it was under six figures that you didn't know yours, right? Any questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send us on full council signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount, a disappropriation amount of $500,000. ARP funds.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Today finds you and the commission or committee well. There are two related pieces here. The health fund is under stress again. Because this is the second time we've asked this year, I was hoping you would allow some testimony, some business colleagues. I want folks in the audience to have some comfort in this plan as well administered because it is. If I may, key business partner, our broker, Mike Fredericks and Fredericks Insurance. Mike, can you just share some of the things that we have done recently to make sure this plan is solvent?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of everyone tonight. I have had the opportunity to speak before council previously, although it's been a number of years. And over the last particularly 4 years, I would say we've tried to take a number, and I think we have taken a number of measures to minimize what's paid out of the insurance fund and try to maximize the value for the city of Newark. And just to give you a couple quick examples of that, what we see out there in the industry, if you will, among other municipalities and private sector employees, is we see costs going up by somewhere between 6 to 12, sometimes more than 12% a year. To give you an example, the city of Newark's costs have risen over the last 5 years at about a pace of 4% on average per year. So some of those things that we've put in place to have that, have that lower cost increase, if you will, or lower trend is we have, when I say we, I should say the plan has partnered with Licking Memorial Health System to form a most favored nations discount for what's paid out in terms of the services rendered at LMH, for instance. And since that plan has been in place, the insurance fund has saved comparatively, if it wasn't in place, $1.6 billion. Okay. In addition to that, about 3 years ago, there was an effort to put in a new pharmacy benefits manager. And I know you guys stay current on a lot of the news that's out there. If you read, the state of Ohio with their plan has had this under scrutiny in terms of getting a pharmacy benefits manager that, will offer the state employees fund a good deal. We were a little bit ahead of the curve on that, and about 3 years ago, we put that in place because the year prior that we put it in place, the prescription drug spend was approaching $1.1 million. And the last completed year, it was right at, I'll get the exact figure and we'll provide it to you here in a minute, but right at about 600,000. So if we take the savings that the city has gotten because of that over the last 3 years or so, it's over $2 million that the insurance fund has saved. In addition to that, there's been over the last 3 to 4 years or so, again, we have dialed up, so to speak, the wellness efforts to make it a more robust program. And to that end, I want to give you an example on that. Just about 8 years ago or so, we had between 18 to 22 individuals that were considered catastrophic or had, can't go into specific details about specific people, but we had between 18 to 22 people that were generating significantly high claims. And that was in that period, if you recall, 7 or 8 years ago, where the cost really increased dramatically. So because of the wellness program, it emphasizes preventative care, getting the American Medical Association age and sex appropriate tests, so colonoscopies, you know, for instance, mammographies, all those types of things. We want to detect those severe conditions at a very early stage so that they can, you know, the people can be, you know, have a cure more easily at those lower stages of those diseases. Plus, it's more cost effective. It's about a dime on the dollar when you find those conditions at those lower, less severe diagnosis stages. So anyway, to give you an example, in that period before the wellness, we had about 18 to 22 people. The last 3 years, we're averaging about 4 to 6. So if you consider that the city's stop loss coverage, which, you know, the city funds people's medical expenses up to about 150,000, then that stop loss protection kicks in and the city's no longer responsible for that. If you do the mathematics on that, 4 to 6 compared to 18 to 20, that's pretty significant savings when you take that difference and multiply it by 150,000. So that's a reflection of the increased emphasis that was put on the wellness program. In addition to, I want you guys to know, being associated with the city, you know, it's kind of, people have the insurance card and it says Med Ben, okay? But there's more to it than that. There's the actual stop loss carrier who holds the risk for the city or who reimburses the city for that, for those claims that are over 150,000. We have changed stop loss carriers about 5 or 6 times over the last 21 or 22 years. It's not just the same, you're gonna see the same card, it says Med Ben and everything, but it does not say the stop loss carrier. And we've tried to, I think, effectively look and get arrangements that are more financially advantageous for the city too. Something else too that has made a difference is we've not only looked at different and done different stop loss carriers, but we have, when it makes sense, changed the network of doctors and hospitals. The latest one that the city is using is LMH, and it's got the most favored nations discounts in it, which means the city pays the lowest of any other network out there, like Medical Mutual or United at LMH and many of the other providers locally. But before that arrangement became available, which was brought to the market by Licking Memorial Health System, we had been with several other different networks. One of them was Medical Mutual, one of them, you know, was Quality Care Partners. So my point is, we've looked around and made sure that when we analyzed what those reimbursements were out of the insurance fund, it was, you know, the most favorable it could be with those different networks. So those are the things we've done to try to sensibly manage the insurance fund so that it gets the best value it can. I just wanted to speak on that for a few minutes, so I appreciate the opportunity to do that. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your consideration. Thank you, Mike, for that important information. If I could call your attention, members of the committee, you should have in your possession a 3-page document. So, Mr. Chair, I was made aware that the first fix did not fix it, and this one was worse than the first. That was on August 1st. August 2nd, I stood up a work group. Myself, I know our auditors here. Brian, thank you for loaning us. Jack and Jim have been great. Our treasurer, Project Insurance, Med Ben, and HR. And we've really got deep in the weeds on what's going on, what's the cause, and how we fix this once and for all. So we don't have to keep coming back and interrupting legislative and executive spending priorities. If I call your attention to the yearly analysis, and there's an expense distribution right behind it. And Mr. Chair, if you would allow one more time, we've got our Chief Principal Officer from Med Ben, Kurt Harden, can take us a deeper dive on these numbers. It is medical spend that is very hard to forecast. It's driving these costs. They're up over $650,000. But I thought, hearing from the persons who give us this information, again, might be helpful for the committee. Mr. Chair, may I?
Sure.
Or if you would, please.
Thank you. Kurt Burden. If you look at this document, I'll just sort of explain to you how we analyze the cost for the plan. So you start out in 2020 and, I'll point a couple things out. And trust me, I won't spend 5 or 10 minutes on every year. I'll move along quickly and let your questions decide how long we linger on this. So you see the pharmacy spend there at 1.05 and then the medical spend at 4.06. That red negative number are stop loss reimbursements that you get from the reinsurance carrier that protects you for catastrophic claims on there. And basically you can look at this. This first section is raw claims. So you can go across to year to date and you can see how raw claims have adjusted. So you had a 2% increase from 20 to 21. You had a minus 2%. A reduction in 22, 7% increase in 23, and year to date, when we factor in stop loss reimbursements that you will be receiving on some large claim activity, you've got significant additional large claim activity. About a 7% is what we're projecting by year end. Unfortunately, you've had quite a few of those large dollar claims in the first half of the year. So they started hitting April, May, and then you've actually had another slug in the first week of August occur. The second way we look at the cost is that next section down. That is on a PEPY basis. So that factors in the enrollment in the plan, like how many people you have in the plan. And so that you can track across 3, -1, 6, 8, projected for this year. That is an average about 4% per year, but certainly this year is a little bit bigger. If you go to this document that says expense distribution, you can kind of see what Bill was just talking about. One more page. Yeah, it's back page. Looks like I've been packet. So the top section here is year to date 2024. And what we do is we stratify that by the top 1% of claimants. So the people who spent the most of all your claimants. So 7 members spent $769,000. Last year you had 8 members who only spent $578,000. You see that comparison? But what's interesting is in every single section of this, this year to date, had an increase in that. You've actually had a 10% increase in claims filed. You've had about a $400,000 swing in large claims from last year to this year, a $650,000 swing in claims just at hospital care, inpatient procedures. So it's just, that has been, that $635,000 you can see is that difference between that 2.9 million this year and the 2.3 million last year. So while the plan has actually beat trend over a 4-year period, this year in the first half of the year, you really have experienced greater activity in almost all categories. Large claims, claims filed, just raw claims filed, and so forth. So that's sort of a summary of what has occurred this year to date. Question?
Any questions so far? Yes.
Back on that first page of what we were handed, the claims ineligible for the trend, there's a $200,000 negative balance there. Can you just explain what that?
Yeah, so you had a couple of claimants that experienced claims that quickly got to your $150,000 responsibility. It's sort of your deductible before the stop loss carrier kicks in. And then you had a third claimant, candidly, that is very close to hitting that. You will not experience those claims on the plan in the rest of the year. So those claims don't get trended because you'll start getting reimbursements from a stop loss carrier. So you accumulate all those claims in the first half, but in the second half you won't. And if we just annualize by taking the 7 months, dividing by 7 and multiplying by 12 without taking that out, it would inflate that. Now, your question brings up something that I always want to make sure I tell people. I can't predict when you'll have a catastrophic claim. You can have 3 more catastrophic claims this year. That's insurance, that happens. But when we do a projection, what we do is we take out what we know and we factor that into that projection. So does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, certainly.
Thank you, Kurt, for that important information. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the courtesy. Kurt, you may have got one.
There you go.
So, lastly, Mr. Chair, if I could pull your attention to the historical annual results in 2024 estimation. The plan is well managed. We have a funding challenge and we have a decision to make. If you look at 2019, at any given time, we need about 10% in what I would call a checking account to pay our bills, 10% of the plan's cost. 152,000 is not 10%. You can see subsidy was required. So even though we brought some funds forward in 2020, the net aggregate was we overspent. However, in 20 had a good year, brought it forward to 21, had a better year in 22, brought it forward to 23. And then in 24, we started out with 10%. We thought we was going to spend $5 million, because I have 592 in our checking account's a blessing. But we've had these runs, and you've heard Kurt explain. So the question becomes, what do we do about that? I have come to the conclusion that a line item budgetary model, something not only the checking account, 10% of the fund, but a standalone line item in the budget somewhere that we can tap into that, because it's not lost on me that we're interrupting spending priorities coming and asking for money in the middle of the year. That's the best I can do. I've really taken a deep dive, stood up a work group. I think Kurt will agree. I've probably asked more information than most of your clients in the last couple of weeks, but we're really trying to get our hands around this. We don't have to do this again. I've made some recommendations in writing. I wish to be transparent where we're going to go next year. I know there's members of the committee. I've answered all the questions. I know they're bold. I know they're a big change, but they're necessary. I can only go in the numbers that I'm given. And I'm trying to not have to go through this circumstance in the future. So I certainly would answer any question you have, and we really appreciate your support with the additional appropriation.
Yes, Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Director Spurgeon. A question about the cash to start the year, because it looks like just from the calculations, my understanding is it's a simple carryover from the prior year's ending balance. Is there any sort of calculation beyond simply carrying that balance over to assign an amount to the fund to start the year? Is there any sort of projection analysis done at that point?
Yeah, to be clear, I'm asking for two things. 10% of the total cost. This is a checking account. And I need 10% of the cost of the plan that will likely get us through the year. But again, these events, these in-hospital stays are very difficult to forecast. What happens if I overrun those monies in the checking account? That's why I'm asking for an additional 10% parked somewhere where if we need reserves above and beyond the money we've been given in our checking account, we can have access to it. I'm trying not to interrupt spending priorities of the elected and the appointeds.
Other questions? Okay, so, I guess the first question I have is, you know, I went back to even 2022. I went back to 2015 and just looking at forecasts, you know, countrywide as far as projections, and I'm even looking at projections moving forward of healthcare costs and increases. There's never been any projections that I've seen on increased costs of healthcare in the last 10 years. It's been below, it's been at 4%. In the past 5 years, we've taken no increases in our rate to make this solvent in a real world, and you know, to be really solvent, we would have enough cash reserve to handle any catastrophic event. I guess, why haven't we taken any increases for the past 5 years? Why, when all the trends were going that direction, Medicare, Medicaid has all had increases. Why have we not seen any?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. Thank you for your question, Mr. Chair. So This self-funded preferred provider organization model started in 2019, so I did research before that. But what I noticed, my trends digging deep, is we have 10% starting in 2021. We have over 20 or 10% of the total cost. So that would be me coming to council saying, hey, let's charge everybody some more money. The citizens incur 85% of that, and I don't have a benchmark to do it by. And that's why I'm floating the conversation now that let's build a reserve. Let's be bold on the changes we can together consider, and perhaps making a health fund that it builds up its own. But the numbers I've been given, it still doesn't happen until 2027. But to come ask for additional appropriation without any, just because, I don't think that would have went over well. When I have the benchmarks in the budget from 21 on that I've indicated I need.
And back to the question, the last 5 years, why have we not had any rate increases?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, just answered your question.
Well, the thing is, apparently 10% wasn't enough. You said we had 10% this year.
And you've heard, Mr. Chair, that there are things that are very hard to forecast.
You're right, and that's why you have reserve, and 10% is not sufficient.
This is a checking account. I'm talking about a checking account and a reserve, not just a checking account.
I know, exactly.
Okay.
So that's why I'm asking, why was that not done? How many other providers, Mr. Harden, do you have? How many of them have reserves?
The majority have reserves, yeah,
And we have not, correct?
yeah. Since you started, I don't think.
Right. So I guess, you know, that's what I'm asking. And so knowing all the trends, knowing that, you know, insurance is an up and down, it's a roller coaster ride. You don't know when you're gonna have a catastrophic event. And you don't know when you're gonna have that perfect storm. So you do have to have those reserves. And I guess, you know, if we would have taken smaller rate increases in the past years to knowing that, you know, these things happen. And then if you do have an overabundance, and we've done this in the past where we had premium holidays, but you have to have that's, you know, we have to have enough to be solvent that the fund is more or less taking care of itself, and our benefit plan is taking care of itself. Now, the city provides a portion of that comes out of our expenses in our budget, and we realize that, and we're willing to pay that cost. And it's a lot easier to come up with, you know, percentages, a 3-4% increase in our budget over the past 5 years versus, you know, a 20-30% all at once. That's a hard hit. So that's why I'm saying, when you look at insurance, you have to look at trends, you look at past history to predict future losses. And that's what you look at. And looking at the history, not only in the city, not only that, what's been the reduction in participants? What's the percentage reduction in participants?
In the plan,
Yeah, in the last 5 years.
I don't know a percentage, I got the numbers.
What's the number?
Well, the employees, we in 2019 had 308, in 2024 got 295. I've also got total members on this document here, which will show you their dependents, average members, total of 870 in 2020, total of 758 in 2024 annualized.
Yeah, and what's the aging? Where's our aging gone from what 5-year increment? Are we an aging population with this?
I would imagine we are.
Right,
We have
so
had
that
a lot of
also
rolling over.
increases.
So we've had a lot of turnover and people retiring out, so we're gonna be younger. But I say now it's reasonable forecast.
Well, I'm just asking, you know, why haven't we, you know, the majority of self-insured programs always have a reserve. We haven't had a reserve. The other thing is the trends across the country have been increases. We have not increased our rates in the last 5 years. We know that the participant level has gone down. Anytime you have a reduction in participants, the sharing of the wealth is not as great, so it doesn't help your plan. The fewer you have in your plan, actually, the harder it is to manage, because then it takes a lower number of catastrophic events to really kind of, really hurt your plan. So looking at all those things, are those all being looked at? Are we continuously monitoring these and making sure that in the future, if we, I guess that 10%, I don't know if that's enough. It looks as if we have to have a little bit more than that. And unfortunately, we don't have the funds. We're looking at, $700,000 in just this evening's appropriation, plus the appropriations we already made this year. We're at about $1 million that we're having to, bail out. And that's 100% taxpayer dollars, no participant dollars.
You made it clear at the last finance committee meeting, you expected someone to spearhead this effort. I have been looking at trend analysis, and everything I get is in the end of third quarter, September. And our claimed experience, you heard Kurt say earlier, we're going down, down, down. And we knew their average cost, all the dynamics that you spoke of, we knew that. But we thought the protective measures that we put in there would be fine to get us through 2024. We've never experienced this run like this on these medical claims since 2019, when I've been looking at the numbers. So I'm happy to assume that role, and I did, August 1st. I was alarmed. What do you mean they didn't fix it the last time? And right then, HR spearheaded the effort. We put a work group together. We're actually going to put our hands around this. And I've been more proactive in the budgetary process. I went writing, this is what I think we should do. I've not done that in the past. So I heard what you said last time.
Sure.
I've taken great effort to get our hands around things. But I don't know about the past. Why did we do this? Why did we do that? Because the numbers, the trend experience that I had, the indicators I had, asking for more money without a benchmark, 10% is a number that MedBen gives to me. They're the experts, 10% of your plan. That's what I have to go on the information I have.
So the 10% of the plan, when you say that, you say 10% in the checking account and then plus a reserve?
I believe that's the way to
Okay, so
go.
what is that number? Is it an additional 10%?
Yeah, it's 10%. Put it in the email I sent to you. So 10% of the plan next year, 627,000. And we need to raise the rates because we're not going to carry over 627,000 unspent dollars this year. That's why I'm doing bold and dramatic predictions. And listen, we have got to participate in part of this solution. And I have been public that we're going to talk about modifications to the plan. We'll benchmark against our comparators in the region or areas where we, as participants, I believe can participate at a greater level. But I've always looked at the healthcare committee as a partnership, not an employer mandate, and we're meeting Wednesday. So I can't speak a lot to why did we do this? Why didn't we do that? I just did not involve myself in the budgetary process. There have been thoughts before on 2.2 months of runoff was $1.7 million. We talked about that in 2021, I believe, internally. It's a big number. So we attempted to live off of our savings. We have had a run of high cost medical events that we just cannot predict.
Mr. Jarrett,
Yes, Mr. Howell.
you mentioned the Director's burden about keeping, having a 10% reserve, I guess excluding amounts held in what we'll call a checking account, but the plan essentially here. Would that be basically irregardless of how much is carried over from the prior year? Is that kind of the thought, or would it be evaluated based on what is?
Great question, Mr. Hauser. Thank you for asking. And through the chair, Mr. Hauser, and I'll say this publicly, if we see the trends, our experience going down, then we'll come back and we'll adjust the rates down. It's not lost on me that the citizens are picking up 85% of the tab. We can only go on the metrics we have. And what I have today tells me that we are going to deficit spend. We need help for the rest of the year, and there's going to be no carryover going in there. So that's why I say we've got to crank the rates up to get some money in there at an accelerated rate as paying out and get the reserves built up. And even the predictions, we won't get 10% of the fund carryover until 2026 doing that with the revision I've asked for, or at least recommended to the committee to consider. So there will be a carryover next year. That's why I'm going to raise the rates to build that up. But why is it somebody asking for reserve? Mr. Chair, I'm asking for a reserve as well. But I do recognize that the participants are going to participate. I've been transparent and I put it in writing, and I've been talking to people and taking their hard questions since August first.
Are we, so looking at the research that I looked at, anticipation in 2025 is looking at healthcare costs increasing at about 8%. Did we take that into consideration for what we're doing here?
So we have a cost model from our MedVent partners. The cost model, I don't want to speak to Brian's numbers, Kurt, they're pretty
We did
granular.
10% trend for
Okay.
that model. That's what we use. 10% for next year.
Okay.
And that's where I've got my 10% to cover it. That is,
And we agreed with the, I mean, we were within $30,000 of the auditor's projection too.
Okay.
So we sat down and kind of looked at that and checked each other's assumptions, so.
Here's the biggest thing that, you know, I just, and I know that things happen sometimes. You get that perfect storm of claims. I just want to make sure that we are in a position that we can protect our benefit plan. And it's not in a situation where we have to bail out and we have the funds available. So then, you know, for the folks who participate, looking at a $20 or less increase a year compared to, we're looking at now at the 30% is over $100 or right around $100 a month difference. That's a big hit for folks. And so, you know, I understand that, you know, we always want to be cautious in increasing our rates. You don't take rate just because you can, take it because of what you need. But you can also back off if it doesn't trend that direction. And we have to make sure that we stay ahead of this. Because quite frankly, if we don't have, you know, the funds from the ARP, the city, I mean, $1 million hit's $1 million hit. And, you know, our budget is tight enough. And what I mean by that is we cut as many corners as we can to make sure to keep our spending down. And we need to take care of our folks and not increase their costs of living and doing what we can, or doing it at an incremental rate versus a huge increase all at once. That's a heavy hit on families. It really is. And I want to make sure that we're doing our best to avoid that in the future. And not only that, it's a huge hit on the city. It's going to be a huge hit. That percentage increase also increases 30% of what our budget is going to be. And, you know, the city does a great job of trying to save money here to pay here. And, you know, we look at the things that are coming off the books or what we can anticipate as far as revenue increases, and we're seeing some revenue increases to help, but that also means that we need to do things for the employees as far as increasing, because cost of living is going up. You know, we all know what inflation's doing, so just want to make sure that we're protecting the solvency of the city, our finances, and then also protecting the employees who are participants in this program so they don't take those huge hits. And I just want to make sure that we're avoiding that and that we are on a direct path. You know, if we have another perfect storm next year, are we going to be able to withstand that in the first half of next year?
I've made my recommendations. Depends what the legislature chooses to do with when the mayor submits his budget. May I, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
You said something, you're absolutely right. It was asked the last finance, not last, but when this was discussed previously, well, who's going to be responsible for this? It's a group effort. There's just too many moving parts in one person, but I will spearhead it. Again, August 1st, I was, we're not good. And the very next day, the work group stood up, meet with Kurt regularly. We will take the additional guidance you spoke of, but let me speak to the people in the audience and plan participants. It's real. It's not lost on me. This is money, and people are struggling. So we absolutely try to do two things: make sure our plan participants are well, and make sure we keep our hands around the money. So I'll commit to do that. But again, it's a partnership. I couldn't be happy with the auditor, the treasurer, and of course, our business partners, the Frederick Insurance and that bank. We're gonna get our hands around this, but we need to take some measures to fix it.
Any additional questions? Any questions from anyone in the audience? All right, so the first item is a disappropriation for the $500,000. The other thing that I am gonna mention to the committee, so we have the disappropriation, the appropriations for the 500,000, but we also, there's an additional 200,000 that is not gonna be voted on committee, because we have to get that in right away this evening during council. So that is going to be invoked by Rule 11. So it's gonna just go straight on so the money can get right into the account because we are that short. So we have that 200,000 will go at the regular council this evening without being voted through committee. Because of the minority and majority chairs are gonna vote Rule 11. So any additional questions? I'll entertain a motion for the disappropriation of the $500,000.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send it on the full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item is I'll entertain a motion for an appropriation for the $500,000.
So moved.
Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send this on full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next one is another appropriation for the $500,000 to actually put it into the health insurance fund. And go ahead.
Motion.
Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send this on the full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. All right, next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $218,334.79.
Yeah, good. Yes, Mr. Chair, I speak for Mr. Moorhead, the engineer. This is appropriation out of COVID. The first item, I believe, is for a study on the widening of West Main Street out by the Vista project on the far west side. And I believe the other was for a study for structure of buildings we have around the city. This is just out of ARP funds.
Well, for motion.
Oh, yeah, he's here.
Motion by Lang,
I'll second.
second by Hauser. You have more to add, Brian, or you good?
He's pretty much covered.
Okay. Questions, Mr.
Yeah.
Lang?
Brian, I just wanted to confirm what we have left then in the COVID funds.
It's pretty much going down all the way.
That's done. Okay.
Thank you. There's not gonna be much left.
Yeah, that's all we're.
And that there's a little bit in the first tranche, but yeah, it's pretty much, and actually, not to bring that up, it's a good question, you know, it's just as auditor, I caution all members, I was talking to Council President Harris the other day. You know, we've had these ARP funds, they've bailed us out on a lot of items, but you know, you heard tonight, I mean. We are really projected to carry over in 26 to not be very much, so be careful with spending, be careful with the promises you make, because money is gonna get tighter. This ARP funds have been great to bail us out, but they're about going, so just, I advise everybody to be very cautious.
Mr. Mayor, can you also just make the comments on, I know you learned some stuff about ARP funds, and I think it's worthy that everybody hear about the rules of the ARP funds and what's really happening.
Absolutely, yeah, it's, you gotta think that program came around pretty quick. Over the last couple of years, so something like CDBG's been around for decades and it's been well defined and tweaked so many times that it's kind of a well-oiled machine. Not so with this, and this has been something, a learning process, so I do the quarterly reports and Jim and I review them. They update about 150 pages of data on that every quarter and don't necessarily tell you what they've updated. So it's quite a project in a lot of ways, but as we're winding this down, we had a great meeting, last week with, some department heads to come up with the $500,001, but also to realign some things. So we're closing out some small little things that have $2,000 and $3,000 left. We're moving them over to Service General where we can use them. And so at the end of the day, I was on a virtual call this past week with the National League of Cities and really got into the dollars. The money you've heard two dates, you've heard 12/31/24 and 12/31/26. 12/31/24, of course, is around the corner here. We have to spend the money or we have to have committed the money.
Contracts.
Right, which the contract would be one form, there's a couple of little ways, or maybe you ordered something and come in yet and you haven't paid for it. But we're gonna have to have that commitment by the end of the year. And I believe, I know the reporting process well enough online now, you're not gonna be able to change that after that. So council making a move of appropriation or even encumbering, that doesn't do it. It has to be committed with some vendor out there for supplies or services. And so what we're gonna do, we're gonna keep meeting regularly here and narrow this down even more as we go here. And we'll keep you updated, but we'll probably have a couple projects out there, water, wastewater, that'll carry over, and that's okay, because we'll be committed through a contract. And we'll have until the end of 26 to spend that, so.
I thought that was important because that's a little bit, we did think it was more or less the encumbered
Right,
and.
it's not, I
That
verified
last week.
what is, what is and what is not appropriate to do this, so it has to be done through that way, so. We'll keep you updated, yeah.
Yeah, just quick follow-up with Mayor. So as far as, our reporting, it sounds like that's all been going pretty well. We haven't had any issues.
Right.
How long into the future then do those reporting obligations,
All the way to the end of 26.
the end of 26?
Now, I assume if you used up all your dollars, I think you probably, there's some close to close it out a little bit, I don't think you file the zeros, but we have about 36 projects, I think now. It's a little different than how it is in our accounting system, but it's a project and you can keep adding on. We've extended some projects and we've done a little bit, but now when you get into a contract, it'd be a different thing. We've got some water and stormwater funds here, wastewater funds and water funds that will go into a contract, and I'm sure Brandon has got that set up a little bit, and then we'll have that committed, and like this much is committed and this much was spent this quarter. And then we'll do that each quarter as we go past the 12/31 of this year time. So the reporting, it's set up to report clear to the end of that fourth quarter of 26, if you need that many quarters.
We haven't had any, we haven't been challenged on anything yet.
Nope, and it's been audited, it gets a single audit through our auditors, so we audited for 21-22, I think it was, this last time, so it audits as it goes through. But I want the well-oiled machine. I tell people I double cross my T's and double dot my I's, so I don't, knock on wood, there'll be enough people out there probably having issues and problems. The problem now really ends up some of your big cities. I think Cleveland got 500 million. I think Columbus got 208 million. It's some big numbers and it's kind of hard to spend that money a little bit for them. So there's a lot of money they have not spent. And I think that's where the focus is. It's like any grant money, they want you to spend it. I mean, that's the idea of it, to use it in areas. So we don't have that problem because we didn't have those huge dollars like that, but it seems like that's where the focus is. So I'd rather have them focus on them and not focus on us.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Next item on the agenda, it's one that we're not going to vote on. It also is going to be invoked by Rule 11. And it's a request for appropriation amount of $13,520,000. We're just going to talk about it.
Yes, thanks again, Mr. Chair. This money has already been voted on and we will have the money in hand in our bank account tomorrow. So we went ahead and did the appropriation now, so we don't want to delay progress because I believe Dugan Myers is going to be starting Wednesday. So, it doesn't, nice weather, we don't want to project. And I also want to give credit to Service Director Rhodes. He did make some space for him inside City Hall, so they're real close. So if there's any problems, you don't have to make a call. We'll have somebody on the site. So money will be here tomorrow, and you're gonna start seeing action on Wednesday.
Very good. We did not vote on section 4, so my bad on that. So any additional questions on the appropriation of the $218,334.79? Seeing none, all those in favor, send some full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Any questions on anything that the auditor had about the parking garage? Very good. Next item on the agenda is a request for an ordinance to provide for the issuance of not to exceed $730,000 of bonds for the purpose of paying a portion of the cost of the burial of overhead electrical cable and telephone lines, including easement, acquisition, and alley repairs, and all necessary appurtenances thereto, by retiring those previously issued in anticipation of such bonds, matters related to such bonds, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's okay with you, I'll just speak to all of these ordinances here at one time.
Correct.
Okay, these our projects are basically 90% complete, a little over 90%. Well, we've had bond anticipation notes on these. It was my decision along with, the mayor, Brandon, Brian, and David Rhodes. Let's go ahead and put these on a 30-year bond. A couple reasons why. We just had a bond rating with this parking garage, so there's no, new, those are expensive, and it came back to AA-, which is very good. So the city scored very well on that. Since we already had that, we did need to get another bond rating call. Since we're over 90%, why pay interest again for another year? So we've got these projects lined, put them on a 30-year bond, and we're ready to go. So I think we're in good hands. Any questions about all the details of the projects would have to go to Brandon or Brian, but financially, we're all set for this. And again, I saw no purpose to put them on notes and waste more money on interest. We need to get debt paid down for a living.
What was the rate on the bond at 30-year?
Right now, I was tomorrow, I think we'd be looking at high 4s on the apartment garage. If you remember, we did a, tax exempt and taxable, so the blended rate was a 5.2, but since it's just us, I think we're gonna be in high 4s.
Motion.
I'll second.
Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send this on full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Next ordinance is to provide for the issuance of not to exceed $890,000 of bonds for the purpose of paying a portion of the cost of constructing the 4th and Main roundabout by retiring those previously issued in anticipation of such bonds, matters related to such bonds, and declare an emergency. Entertain motions.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send this on full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next ordinance is to provide for the issuance of not to exceed $2,130,000 of bonds for the purpose of paying a portion of the cost of the proposed multi-road bridge and bike path improvements, and providing additional funds for such improvements by retiring notes previously issued in anticipation of such bonds, matters related to such bonds, and declaring an emergency. Entertain motion.
Motion. Second.
Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send this on full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, that motion passes 5-0. Next ordinance is to provide for the issuance of not to exceed $840,000 of bonds for the purpose of paying a portion of the cost of the ice rink roof replacement by retiring notes previously issued in anticipation of such bonds, matters related to such bonds, and declare an emergency. Entertain a motion.
Second.
Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send this on the full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next ordinance is to provide for the issuance of not to exceed $2,590,000 of bonds for the purpose of paying a portion of the cost of Tamarack 40th Street upgrades, stormwater sewer improvements comprised of property and or easement acquisition, utility relocation, storm sewer installation, replacement and repair, together with pavement, sidewalk and grading improvements, and all necessary appurtenances thereto, by retiring those previously issued in the anticipation of such bonds, matters related to such bonds, and declare an emergency. Motion.
Second.
Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send this on full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next ordinance is to provide for the issuance of not to exceed $3,170,000 of bonds for the purpose of paying a portion of the cost of the initial water system improvements and all necessary appurtenances thereto by retiring notes previously issued in the anticipation of such bonds, matters related to such bonds, declaring an emergency. Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send us on full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. And then the final ordinance is consolidating up to 6 bonds, all 6 of these of the issuance of the city of Newark, Ohio, establishing the terms of such consolidated bond issue and declaring an emergency. Motion. Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. And just to clarify, this last piece of legislation is just combining all the other pieces together into one. Any additional questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send this on full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. And with that, this finance committee meeting stands adjourned. Next up is service. Thanks, Mark. Thanks a lot. Yeah, good seeing you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you for your time.
I wanted to say to you, I'm sorry to see you leave. But I think, but I appreciate it. Okay.
I'm sorry, we'll close service committee meeting in order. Those present are myself, Brad, Beasley, Paul, Klein, and Shoot. First resolution 24-71, a resolution authorizing Newark Development Partners to act as agent for the city of Newark for the sale of certain parcels of property and authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Newark Development Partners governing the sale and distribution proceeds. Anybody, Mr. Morris?
I'll speak on this one.
Thank you.
This is, for 3 properties on Mount Vernon Road. Just north of State Route 16, 182, 184, and 188. Service director would like to be able to, transfer these properties over to Newark Development Partners. And
I agree.
work with the law director together to discuss the legislation and understand it with Newark Development Partners as this transfer moves forward.
Okay, fair enough. Any questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor pass this on the council. I'm sorry. I'll entertain a motion. Second. Trying to get done so we can get everything done. Seconded by Neely. So motion by Blind, seconded by Neely. No additional questions. All those in favor pass this on the council, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. That motion will pass with a vote of 5-0. That concludes the service committee meeting. Up next will be the capital improvement.
Somebody.
Okay,
Call this capital improvements committee meeting to order. Those present, myself, Rath, Marmy, Labutus, Neely. Mr. Unger?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Shute. On behalf of Service Director David Rhodes, he's asked me to fill in this evening. He's asking to appropriate the rest of this money for capital improvements. And in anticipation, we need to fix items if they get broke, and he will be a good steward of money, and anything that's not spent will go into carryover for next year.
I should have said for the record, that we're considering resolution number 24-72, appropriating monies for current expenses in municipal road region.
Yeah, pretty new. This is normally what he does around this time of the year, so this is not a big thing I've worked here.
Any questions from the committee? From the audience?
Motion.
Second. Motion by Rath, second by Labutus. All those in favor of passing this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
And with that, capital improvements committee stands adjourned.
Yeah, no.
Yes. Thanks.
Yeah, that does make sense.